Welcome to Color Me Green, a podcast focused on making the world a greener place. So today's episode was actually supposed to be something completely different. Monday was National Recycling Day, and I was obviously going to make an episode on recycling. However, I was on Google getting ready to do my research, and I came across a CNN article on human composting. And as you can figure, I was very intrigued. If you don't like listening to stuff about dead people and what happens after death and all that stuff, then this episode probably isn't for you. However, side note, we are going to call this a little sponsored by myself or a self-promo section. If you are into creepy things, you'd probably enjoy my second podcast that I started called Here for the Booze, where I enjoy a nice adult beverage and talk about things that are more likely than not going to scare me. I've already done 2 episodes, the first on the origins of Halloween, and the second, posted this week, is on the history of witches. This podcast, Color Me Green, is posted on Wednesdays, and Here for the Booze is posted every Monday. I love it, and it's just another creative outlet for me that I also get to learn from at the same time. So you should head over there and check it out, but obviously only after listening to today's episode here. Today's episode might be on the shorter side, by the way, because I'm really just going off of the article I found. I'm reading from it and basically making commentary as I go along because it's just very interesting. Now back to composting dead bodies. Human composting, also known as natural organic reduction or the reduction of human remains, is the practice of placing a dead body in a reusable vessel with biodegradable materials that foster the transformation into nutrient-dense soil that can be returned to loved ones or donated to conservation land. Actually, cremating is pretty harmful to the planet. Cremating one corpse emits about 418 pounds of carbon dioxide, which is equivalent to driving 470 miles in a car. In the US, cremations account for 1.74 billion pounds of carbon dioxide emissions each year. And if my math is correct, and I wouldn't count on it, but on the off chance that it is, I believe that is about 4 million people per year just in the US. The article also quotes Katrina Spade, the founder and CEO of Recompose, which is a licensed green funeral home in Seattle. Katrina states, human composting uses much less energy than cremation, which uses fossil gas to create heat of over 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. When human composting transforms the organic material of our bodies, carbon is also sequestered in the soil created. Rather than being released as carbon dioxide gas through exhaust during cremation, the carbon matter contained in each body returns to the earth. It goes on to explain that Recompose began the first human composting facility in the U.S. when it opened in December 2020. Washington became the first state to legalize human composting in 2019, followed by Oregon, Colorado, and Vermont. And California actually recently signed a bill into law for this as well, and it's set to go into effect in 2027. New York State and Massachusetts are also on their way to passing the bills as well. I love the fact that this article explained that there isn't much research on the practice and that more needs to be done to find out the larger benefits for the environment compared to burials, green burials, and cremation. They also noted that it isn't entirely carbon-free since it does involve machinery operated by electricity and transportation of bodies, materials, and remains. I'm sure there are ways to make sure the back end is more sustainable, but like I always say here, baby steps are still steps as long as we are moving forward to do better. Honestly though, how cool does that sound? I mean, we are going to get into the environmental benefits of it, but imagine having your body just go into the earth and be one with it. I think it's great, actually. For example, let's say your family member loves gardening. You could take the soil made from their remains and plant it in a garden or their garden, or plant their favorite flowers or a tree with it. It's such a nicer way of honoring someone than just burying them in the ground or throwing their ashes into a field or the ocean or wherever people do that. They seem to really focus on Recompose for this article, so I'm sure there are other companies that might have different ways of doing this or that might also do it, but I'm just going off of the article, like I said. I'll have it linked, by the way, in the show notes if you want to go ahead and read the whole thing for yourself. At Recompose, human composting happens in a steel cylinder that's 8 feet long and 4 feet tall. If you're over 8 feet tall, don't worry, they just cut you at the knees so you'll fit, and then they just throw all of you in there. I'm joking. I mean, they probably do. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, a body is placed in the vessel on a bed of wood chips, alfalfa, and straw, which doesn't seem as comfy as a casket, but again, you're dead, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Human composting creates an environment where beneficial microbes thrive with specific moisture content and ratio of carbon and nitrogen materials. Over the next 30 days, everything inside naturally decomposes. One body creates a cubic yard of soil amendment, which is a substance added to soil to improve its texture or health. This gets removed from the vessel and cured for 2 to 6 weeks, where it can be then donated to conservation projects, or a certain amount can be returned to loved ones. Apparently, the amount that loved ones can receive depends on what a state allows, since the soil would still be legally considered human remains with regulations on what people can do with them. And that's kind of odd to me. I mean, it's dirt. It's not like you have someone's actual ashes. And I can actually see this being a thing on the dark web, or kind of like a drug cartel where you transport human dirt remains illegally. And I'm not trying to give anybody any ideas. I'm just saying, if this thing takes off in the future, I don't doubt that it would happen. The article continues going into funeral costs. The median cost of a funeral with cremation in the U.S. in 2021 was $6,971, and the median cost of a funeral with a viewing and burial was $7,848, which doesn't include the plot, headstone, or any other cemetery costs associated with a traditional burial that often doubles the cost, according to the National Funeral Directors Association. So probably around $14,000 for the entire thing, start to finish, which is insane. It's expensive to be born, it's expensive to die, and it's expensive to live. The next section of the article talks about who's a candidate for composting. And that goes into the list of the strangest, weirdest sentences I have ever said in my life. Recompose has composted more than 200 bodies into the soil since opening about 2 years ago. They also have a pre-arrangement program called Pre-Compose, which more than 1,100 people have signed up for. It says that not everyone is eligible for this, sadly. Natural organic reduction destroys most harmful pathogens, but there are 3 rare diseases that disqualify a body from undergoing composting: Ebola, tuberculosis, and diseases caused by prions, which are abnormal transmissible pathogen agents that can cause abnormal folding of certain brain proteins. The end of the article discusses how most funeral homes probably won't take on the practice due to the timeline. Since cremation can be done the same day and a burial can take 3 to 5 days, composting can take up to 120 days. So unless the funeral home is made of money or they start freezing bodies before they compost, it's probably not financially beneficial, since you need a lot of vessels to keep up with normal demand. I mean, I get it. Business is business and time is money. So it might take some time before this can be a widespread practice, but I'm glad to see that it's at least being considered and that states are starting to legalize it. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you like the idea? Do you think it's creepy? Would you want to be composted? I definitely think it's a nice option to consider. I want to thank you for listening to today's episode of Color Me Green. New episodes are coming out weekly, and hopefully each one has something you can take away and learn from. If you want to request a certain topic to discuss, please feel free to message me on the show's Instagram at Color Me Green Podcast, linked in the show notes. If you loved today's episode, please make sure to leave a review, as I will be randomly picking reviews every week as they roll in to read on the show. One of the best ways to help change the world is to share this episode with a friend and let them also learn what they can do to live more sustainably. And please remember to reduce, reuse, recycle, and live green. See you next week.